So I'm installing a UltraCool oil cooling system, but the one I have isn't underneath like this one is pictured. It's more like this one, which is a side mount, and it's supposedly for my Euro bike. I have a 2003 Road King, but I am having an issue with getting this on, and they really don't have videos covering the side mounts. So the side mount is supposed to be positioned on the frame, as you see indicated here by the two black lines above this bracket. But I'll show you what the struggle I am having with this here in just a second. So here's the UltraCool side mount, and here's the bracket, and it's got kind of a wings set up here instead of a solid piece. You know, for example, if this was a solid piece of metal with silver hole options, this would have been wonderful, but it's not. It's specific. This distance is specific, and so you got to hit this mark. And so you have like 3 inches, 3 1/8 inches here roughly in between the centers of both of these holes. So let me show you what my predicament is. So this is the lower bracket that they give you, which looks like this is the top portion. So this is what it looks like assembled. And it's in the right position just above this bracket, right? So that's the bottom one. Now the first one has to go up 3 1/8. Now this pole here is nice and smooth and the same diameter. But you get a couple inches past this, and you have all this extra material that's been welded in at the factory. You can see this weld's here. You have a solid weld on both sides here. And so this diameter is larger, and it's not perfectly round because of these welds. So the bracket doesn't want to go on. See, because the weld, you either have it crooked this way or crooked this way. And if you mount it above the welds there, you have a gap on top. Can you see that gap there? So you could try to fill that gap, but then you have this big gap down here, where on this one here you can see there's no gap. It's perfectly fit. So this is my struggle right here. So when I tried to get this in the right spot, I broke a screw because it's not letting it be pulled together because of these welds. So I've got to modify this, which is what I'm going to attempt to do next. So what I'm going to do is move this bracket, or this clamp, just below this bracket here. So it's like right here. And I'm going to move the other bracket right here. And then I'm going to have to put a piece of bar stock across this so that they could be bolted into these. And then I'll bolt the UltraCooler into the bar stock. And that's about the only way I can do it and have it, because it's got to be in a certain height here, because the hoses are limited on how high they can go and reach the bottom of this. So it's really got to be in this area. Hopefully you can see what I'm talking about there. I've made my bracket and I've put it on, though it's not tight yet. So I drilled holes for the UltraCool cooler to go in, and then this is where the clamps will bolt through. So like I said, if this was one solid piece with several holes in here, you know, instead of this cutout thing, I probably could have made that work. But it really needed to be a little bit longer, and I'll show you that later. Give you an idea. Backside. So this is 3/4 inch bar stock steel painted. You know, it's probably 3/16 thick. So it's a little thicker than what they have here. And I bought stainless steel bolts, and then I've got the nylon lock nut on it, but I'm going to use the blue thread locker on this anyways. Right now I got to move the fittings on the bike, and then we'll go from there. So I have the 2 clamps that came with the kit installed, and as you can see here how much thicker this is, all this welded material from coming down from the gooseneck to this rod. And so this is the upper hole. This is the upper hole right here for the oil cooler. And so the clamp needed to go around all this, and it just wasn't doing it. It was too small, and with all these welds and stuff, and having this an absolute diameter, it just wouldn't fit in here. So I got the two, I've got this piece of bar stock in place. Everything blue Loctited in and tightened up. Now the other thing that's kind of nice with this bar stock is I was able to put these screws in and then mount the clamps on, so everything was perfectly lined up. But with the system the way it is, if I didn't need this bar clamp, you had to get these clamps in just the right distance and just the right angle, that when you put the oil cooler up here, they would bolt right in. So it's a bit more of a challenge that way. It would have been nice, instead of having the screws going in this way, that the screws came in from the back. That way you could have mounted the upper clamp to the oil cooler itself, throw in the screws in the back, tighten up, and be done. And it'd been a piece of cake. So I've had these clamps on and off a couple dozen times now in this project. So I'm about to the point where if I do it anymore, I'm going to need all new bolts, because they're starting to round off the Allen head. So next I'm going to put my oil cooler on this bar stock, and then we'll get into hooking up hoses. So I have the hoses installed, short and long, and they come up underneath the oil cooler, short and long. You use a German torque wrench and put it at good and tight. They say 1 to 2 flats. So let's see if we can get a view of the. So that's in the bracket I made. You can see the bottom pipe clamp. They give you the chrome one. And then behind there, in the center, you can see the other one, which is plugged into this Allen head screw. And then the 2 stainless bolts I put in. But it worked. So it's in place. It's at a slight angle, which I heard them tell me about, so that when the cooler is running, it'll actually put some of the airflow through the top of the engine here. So there's kind of a double effect. So anyway, so oil cooler is in place with the modifications I've made. That bar, it's in place. Now I got to put on a fancy filter that they gave me, which I'll take a shot later and hope nothing leaks.